Alright, I'm Jason from photographyforparents.com. Today I'm going to go over shooting in Aperture Priority Mode. It's one of my favorite modes. I use it for all kinds of things, from family events to sporting activities, school activities, probably 95% of the time. In this video I'm going to go over what it is, why I like it, and how to use it. I'm going to go over some bullet points pretty quick, and then we'll jump into how to use it, and I'll kind of slow it down and explain it a little bit better. So what is aperture priority? It's a camera setting that allows you to manually set your aperture, and the camera will automatically adjust the shutter speed for you to get the best exposure. Again, I'll go over this a little bit more in detail as we go along here. Why is aperture priority the best? This is my opinion. It's easy to understand. It's simple to use on the go. In different events, as you're moving around fast, you only have one setting to adjust, and it also gives you full control over your depth of field, and it can be used for normal and fast action. Like I said, I use it for just about everything. So here's some steps on how to use aperture priority mode. First step, you want to set your camera to the A or the AV. Canon, I think, is AV. It just stands for aperture value, but it means the same thing. There's some examples here of each dial, how it looks. And that's the mode you want to set it to. Step 2, you need to understand your situation and your goals. What's your objective, what you're shooting? What lens do you own? What are you photographing? What's your desired depth of field? These are all things you need to consider. What kind of a camera equipment do you have? How big is your lens? Are you using a zoom lens or a prime lens? These are all things to consider, so you know what your range is and what your abilities are. Step 3 is going to be set your aperture to meet your goals. So I'm going to show you how to set the aperture on the camera. So as a reference, I'm just going to pull up the Nikon manual for the D3300. I don't have a D3300, but I just wanted to use a modern camera. I have a Nikon D80, which is a little older. This has some of the newer features, but depending on your camera, everything's different, but the concepts are still the same. Yeah, and you can just Google your manual, and you can pull it up. Or if you have the book, obviously you can just flip to the page to see how your specific camera settings are. But I also downloaded this just on the PDF so that it's easier to reference. So if you see here, I just jumped to page 106 in this manual, which talks about aperture mode. If you scroll down, it shows you the A for aperture priority, like we were talking about. Next page here, so to choose the aperture while you're in aperture priority for this camera, they have the command dial here, and you just rotate that, and it tells you here, rotate it left for larger apertures, to the right for smaller apertures. This box here is going to tell you, it shows you, like on the back of the camera, the actual screen, it shows you your aperture right here in the middle and your shutter speed over here to the left and your ISO to the right. Now my camera doesn't have this on the screen, so this is the newer model. Some will, some won't, but this is how this displays it for the D3300. More importantly, in your actual viewfinder that you're looking through, you'll have these numbers here. There's some other numbers, but they're just demonstrating your aperture is right here, the f5.6, and to the left of that is your shutter. So while you're actually looking through your viewfinder, you'll be able to see that number, and you can just scroll that command dial to the left or right, and you'll see that number change while you're in aperture priority mode. I just want to specify, so if you are in shutter priority mode, that same command dial will change your shutter, because the camera is going to automatically do your aperture. And there is a way, when you're in manual mode, there's another little function button you press and hold. So if you're holding it, it's going to change one of them, and if you're not holding it, the other one will change whether it's shutter or aperture. It just depends on your camera, and that's how this specific camera works. But check your manual for how yours specifically works. But that's how you set your aperture. You're gonna just go to this command dial. Once you get it in aperture priority mode, set your aperture to whatever you're specifically wanting to use. Okay, so now that you set your aperture, your next step is going to be to point the camera at your subject and check your shutter speed. Your shutter speed is going to fluctuate, remember, and depending on your situation, your shutter speed will differ. So if you're in a lighter area and then you pan over to a area that's a little bit darker, your shutter speed is going to need to slow down to compensate for that loss of light. And you'd be surprised how little changes can affect your shutter speed, so you want to pay attention to that. Let me show you real quick where you do that. Okay, so here's the manual again. I'm just looking at the viewfinder here. So this is the viewfinder that you see here on the right. Over here on the left, this picture is what you're going to see when you're looking through that viewfinder. These are all your focal points, and down here is a strip of numbers. This box over to the right is just that strip blown up. The number 5 here, that's going to be the aperture that you have locked in, that you set, that you want to use. Number 4 here, that's going to be your shutter speed. And so as you point your camera in different directions, depending on how different the lighting is, and you push that shutter button about halfway down, that shutter speed number is going to fluctuate, telling you where your shutter speed is at. And let me take you back to the other page here. This is what we were looking at earlier. This camera also has the shutter and aperture listed on that back panel, that LCD screen. Mine doesn't, but you can use either one. But usually when you're in the middle of some action, it's easiest to just look at the number through that viewfinder and just keep track of your shutter speed. Okay, so we have our aperture set and locked in what we want it to be. We're pointing the camera at our subject, and we're checking what our shutter speed is. Now, that's real important. The next step is that you want to adjust your ISO to achieve the desired shutter speed. So if you're doing an event like a sporting event, action's fast, you want to freeze that action. You know you want a shutter speed 1/800th of a second, or 1/1000th of a second, or even faster. And so if you're pushing that button down about halfway and your shutter speed is coming at 1/400th of a second, you don't want to change your aperture because that's exactly where you want it. So what you want to do is just bump your ISO up until you see that shutter speed in your desired area. So it's real easy. You're on the fly. You're pointing in a direction. You see the shutter speed's a little low. Bump your ISO up until you get in the range that you want to be at for your shutter speed. I'll show you how to adjust your ISO. Basically, you need to just adjust that ISO to get that shutter speed to where you want. So basically what you do with this camera, and again, all cameras are different, you got to check your own manual, but if you click on this little info button, it'll pull up this screen here, and you go over to the ISO, click OK, and then basically it's going to pull up all the different options, and you can just jump over, pick the option that you want, click OK. Each jump in ISO should double your light, and so just try one at a time till you get in that ballpark range of where you want to be, and then you should be good to go. The shutter speed shouldn't fluctuate a ton. Depending on your scenario, it really depends, but normally, you know, if you're outdoors, you're going to have some fluctuation, but you're not going to see, you know, ISO 60 and then all of a sudden, shutter speed 1/60th of a second, and then all of a sudden you're going to be at 1/100th of a second. that would be extremely rare. Normally, you'll just go 1 or 2 stops up and down here and there as you move. But you just got to keep an eye on it, pay attention. But usually, once you get in the ballpark of where you want, you should be good to go, unless something dramatically changes or you go from indoors to outdoors or vice versa. All right, so I'm just gonna go over some final notes real quick, and I kind of covered them already. But your shutter speed is gonna change as you change positions and change angles. It's gonna fluctuate, so you just gotta keep an eye on it. Beforehand, remember we were thinking about our scenario. What are we shooting? Are we at a birthday party with kids just kind of running around, but nothing super fast? You know, we just want to be in the 1/100th to 1/300 range for your shutter speed. Just always keep an eye on it and just adjust it when you need to. You definitely, obviously, want to avoid blurry pictures, and just remember, bumping your ISO can cause graininess, but anyone would rather have a slightly grainy image than a blurry image when you're not wanting to have a blurry image. So just pay attention to that. Keep your eye on it. If you want more information about each setting, the ISO, shutter speed, aperture, we go over those in our blog. I'll put links in the show note. You can check it out. We also go over each camera mode, just kind of cover a basic view of what each do. Shutter priority, manual mode, and aperture priority. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link there also, and I'll put a link to the website that I got that manual off. But you can pretty much just Google whatever manual you need to look up and download it online if you don't have it. But that's pretty much it. It's really easy. I highly suggest you try it out. It's truly my favorite. You may like shutter priority or manual mode better, but manual mode is just so you're changing so many settings. It, to get your desired effect. It probably will give you the best overall control, obviously, but at the same time, when you're on the fly and things are moving fast and you're changing your location, changing your angles, it's hard to continuously adjust all 3 settings on the fly. Aperture priority just gives you so much more control, and shutter priority also does, but with shutter priority, I would rather have control over my depth of field, because then I'm making sure that I have the right focus. I know what I'm getting in focus, versus shutter speed, where that aperture can fluctuate. And being that I can keep my eye on the shutter speed and aperture priority, it's just easier that way, and I can just simply bump my ISO to in the ballpark of where I'm looking for, and pretty much leave it, and it's good to go. So I hope you found this video helpful, and we will see you in the next video. I hope you have a good one. Please leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. We'd love to help. Talk to you later. Have a good one.